Renga has put up the links for us. Thank you, Renga. Thank you, thank you.
Upstairs we go. There's Daddy. Upstairs we go.
Oh, Ash, the freestyle event. It was won by Vidit. And it was a great event overall, but the finals were a little bit of a letdown. In that Report didn't really put up much of a fight in the final match. He got absolutely slaughtered by Vidit. Basically in the opening, both games. You want some words of wisdom, Melt Like Butter? On any particular subject, or just something random and wise? Do you want to know the one simple rule that will keep you from losing 99% of your games? Yeah, people have their ups and downs, you know. People can like look great 1 minute and terrible the next. That can happen. Or someone could seem to be getting lucky and dragging their way through the tournament through tie breaks or something like that, and then suddenly crush the other person in the finals. You know, like there's no full accounting for people's ups and downs and their form and so forth. Panov Karo is a challenging variation, and the Grand Prix attack seems decent, but the Grand Prix attack has sort of more potential for the game to slip away from white, so it's a little less safe of an opening, I guess I would say. Like the game can just kind of drift into black's favor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly, Renga. All right, let me have a look at our tournaments here. So in the 1600 plus group, we have 4 players already. Wow, well before the tournament starts. Nice. And in the under 1600 group, we've got already more than 4 players as well. Fantastic. All right, Lucky J, I'm glad that video was able to help one more person. It is my personal most important video I ever made. So, whoops. Sorry about that. Whoops. Sorry about that. Whoops. Sorry about that. Whoa. And we're back. All right. Cheers, Renga. Are the advanced bots interesting, casual player? Tell us about that experience, because I don't have a lot of experience with those bots, and chess.com seems to think highly of them because they put a lot of time and effort into their bots. By the way, is anything wrong with my broadcast, like the video, the sound, or anything scuffed? Important thing to know, Rainbow Teddies, is you can play any opening you want without tons of theory. So you can really just do what you want. Oh my gosh, Jay, I haven't yet. I'm so sorry. Okay, so some of them are programmed to play well with occasional mistakes. It's not the most obvious thing to get a computer to do to make an occasional appropriate mistake, right? Like normally you can either put it at a certain level, like based on how far ahead it looks or something like that. But now the computers have gotten so good, it's like the trick is thinking how to make them make mistakes that are reasonable or not, too stupid or too weird, right? Hey, cats play chess very well. Good evening or time of day to you. Yeah, I'll definitely try to get to it, Jay. Da, 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 da. Looks like we're going to have some fun tournaments today. Rusty Spork is here, at least 3 weeks in a row, it seems like. Play very well and occasionally don't recapture. See, not recapturing is not a very well programmed mistake from a certain perspective, right? You think overall the bot's ratings are inflated or exaggerated, melt like butter? That would be consistent with some general practices on chess.com to make people feel good about themselves, Like chess.com doesn't want somebody who's a 1600 to play against a bot that's rated 1500 and lose, 2 out of 3 games, because that's going to be dispiriting to the customer. Well, Fibbits, I presume you'd be playing e4 as white. Is that what's you're worried that you will face the French defense? Do you like open positions or closed positions? Do you have any other preferences or chess biases? Why are chess.com ratings lower than Lichess? Because Lichess took that to an absurd level, Mickelwold, and chess.com had some desire to keep things mildly reasonable. You prefer open games. Well, Fibbits, the easiest way to get an open game, it's not going to let me do it that easily. The easiest way to get an open game against the French is going to be to just start exchanging pawns like this. That'll get you an open game. How do you like that? The training program, Eric Blair, is not specifically linked just to Lichess or chess.com. We have some features from both sites, mostly more from chess.com than from Lichess, but we have some features that are useful on either site that are baked into the into the training program. Yeah, Fibbits, you could think of this as the pawn trading variation, right? Like I played e4, black played e6, I predicted d5 was coming, right? And then I said, well, okay, I'm going to trade the maximum number of pawns because I'm Fibbits and I like open positions. Right? So I played c4. And then I can just start capturing, right? Boom, boom, boom. And you've got yourself an open position. There you go. If your opponent takes with the queen because they're afraid of not knowing theory, then you'll get a tempo. And if they play knight f6, you know, they'll be worried about bishop b5 check and maybe not winning the pawn back. But they could play like the more ambitious knight f6. And you could get something like this. So something like that might work out for you, I think. So one thing that the training program has with chess.com is that the training program recommends a fair number of chess books that are also available as chessable courses. And so at any particular level, you might have, well, I mean, it's a lot more if you're rated over 2,000, a lot less if you're rated under 1,000, and it sort of depends. But anyway, you might get some books that you're supposed to read, and you can either read them or study the courses on Chessable. That's considered equivalent for us. One little link we have with Lichess that's convenient is we have direct links on the sparring positions to set up boards on Lichess. You just click a link and it takes you to a Lichess board with the position ready and set up for you, and you can just send the link to someone else and they can come spar a position with you. You're playing a Leela bot at rook odds and you're down 60 games. Okay. Yeah, Janond. Do you want the over 1600 or the under 1600 link? From our club here, you'll be able to see these two links, under 1600, over 1600. The tournament's starting right now, by the way, folks. Oh my goodness, it's starting in 50 seconds. So anybody who's playing, let's get ready to start, huh? Okay, so David's parting wisdom, advice for those about to play. Number one, monotask. Don't listen to the stream while you're playing. Don't watch the stream while you're playing. Some people have been not figuring that out in recent weeks. This is a critical dojo rule, is we don't watch the show while we play. Okay? You just play. That's it. Put away your phone. Turn off your phone. Don't open a computer engine. Don't listen to my comments on your game while you're playing. Number two, have fun. Number three, be nice to your opponent afterwards. Maybe you can even talk to your opponent after the game's done, exchange some ideas. You know, they can learn something from you. You can learn something from them. And of course, when you're done, you can come into the chat if you want and talk with me or other people here in the chat. All right, games are starting. Good luck. Start your engines. Have fun. I'm going to open up some games here so I can start my job, which is to talk about these games, right? If you know your opponent and you're already friends and you know a way to cuss them out that's funny and won't upset them, then you can use Dabo's suggestion and cuss your opponent out. But you have to have sort of a kind of humorous consent from them to really go with that. All right, let's click through our positions here and see which game we might want to start with. We've got an English being responded to with a King's Indian defense. Oh, that's a problem, Filet Gefilte Fish says. Chess.com will mute you for cussing with your friends for fun. They've got some kind of clever bot that's going to find you out. We've got Bishop G5 trading on F6. Black spent a tempo on it, so White says, sure, I will make this trade. An unusual opening. Maybe we'll go with that just because it's so out of the blue and it'll show you what chess is like without any theory. Here we've got C4, D5, so White wanted to play an English opening and Black wanted to play a Scandinavian, so we get something unusual here as well. And here we've got the real Scandinavian. Black's queen came out to recapture this pawn on d5. White chased her back and then put a pawn in the center. Nice start for White. It looks like they've played 2 moves and Black hasn't played any yet. Of course, it's Black's move, so White is 1.5 tempi ahead here. Not 2 tempi ahead, 1.5 because it's Black's turn. And White starts the game out 1/2 tempo ahead. So White's gained 1 tempo out of this opening with Black moving the queen twice, while White moved a pawn in extra time. Knight F6, development, and I guess I could take the start time off of here. That would be an improvement. Oh yeah, all over that. ChatGPT plays chess is the name of this player here. That's right. Good question. If we were in this bishop takes f6 position here, Ash is wondering, would you take with the e pawn or the g pawn? Normally you would take with the e pawn, Ash, so that your bishop could develop and you could castle with a good set of pawns in front of you. But there are some openings where you do take with the g pawn. So that can depend. Here, Black took back with the g-pawn, and Daniil Dubov played an excellent move here. e4, seizing the center. That's part of the point of trading that knight, right? Black looks to strike back in the center with e5. And now you'll see the 2 players engaging in some pawn structure play, right? White decides, I don't want to trade and undouble these pawns, right? Can you imagine not wanting to do that? I certainly can. White's other big option would be maybe to defend this pawn. But White pushed past it, sort of grabbing extra space. And Black immediately challenges White's pawn center, and White advances to d6 with this pawn, cramping in the whole Black queen side. But really exposing this pawn, right? Attacked once, defended once, very far away from all the other White pieces, none of which are developed. So a question to everybody in chat, just sort of an instinct or chess, intuition or judgment question. Before you calculate anything, do your instincts tell you this pawn will be safe here, or that this pawn will be dead here? Before you start calculating, Black trying to attack it again with the rook or something, do you think White can keep this pawn protected? Yes or no? Because sometimes in chess we just have a feeling that we can or can't get away with stuff, right? Or that our opponent can or can't get away with stuff. And it typically depends on how you feel about the moves that led up to a position, right? Like if you feel like White's playing better moves than Black, and then White does something really aggressive, you might think, oh yeah, that probably works, right? But if White's been playing a bunch of bad moves and then suddenly they play an aggressive move, you'd say, oh, that's probably not going to work. White doesn't have, the build-up or the development or the coordination or whatever it is for that, right? Having some instinct like this is at least mildly helpful, if not fully helpful. It lets us know when to stop and think and what lines to look for and so forth. I will be chess in my veins, yeah. We're going to start off over here and then switch to the other one because it's so hard to switch between games on chess.com. And particularly between tournaments. This has become almost impossibly annoying and buggy. All right. So it seems that we've got a mix of answers as to whether this pawn is safe or not over here, right? Yeah, you've had games, you've got the experience of some games where the pawn gets eaten and other games where it's a thorn. So we're kind of being asked here, do you have an instinct whether black will be able to get it or not? My instinct when I first see this move is that it's an overplay by white. And the instinct can be wrong, and I feel like it's a pretty close call here, so I don't have a certainty that the pawn is gone when I see it, but my first thought is white doesn't have a single piece out and has driven this pawn that way. Normally you need to have some little advantage in development or something to be able to support the pawn. Okay? So FXL plays the move which I then subsequently calculated, which is queen a5 check, headed to either b4 or c5 to go after this pawn. Hi, Richard. And white plays queen d2. And now it's black to play. I will be right back. I'm going to go tuck a kid in. Okay, let's see what black came up with here. Queen takes d2, trading the defender of the pawn. Nice thinking, black. Pawn has been picked. Knight comes on the attack. Bishop plays itself aggressively. Reasonable. Like, my instinct is just to drop back. I'm so happy I got my pawn. I gotta tell you, maybe I'm too passive, too sated when I get something from my opponent, but my instinct would have been to drop back. White castles with ideas of blocking black up on the d6 square again. And now it's for black to play, but, they're already up a pawn, so things are going very nicely for black. Ooh. Maybe I should have tweeted that our tournament was going on, huh? I had too much going on with the kids tonight. So let's go. Friday Night Fights has started at ChessDojo. You can join anytime. All right, posted it. Now, folks out there could know. Could taking the extra pawn and giving up castling rights be good here? So I think MPK is wanting to take another pawn on F2. So that's where maybe our instincts come in about how good is Black's position. Is it 2 pawns good? Is our instinct that we have time to do this or not? And then in the end, there's maybe not that much to calculate. You might eventually have to make this choice on instinct as well, right? But I often start with the instinct, then do a little calculation, and then make the choice. And here, my instinct is that we should not be grabbing another pawn on F2. It's going to open the F file for white to attack F6 and F7, and it's going to allow the white knight into D6, blocking up our queen side. So my instinct is, I've already got 1 pawn. Why would I go searching for something so risky with more than one disadvantage to it, right? The move has more than one disadvantage, in addition to the obvious disadvantage that it's spending time. So the move I would have liked to play here as FXL would actually be a move that forfeits castling rights, like MPK was asking about. It would be this move, defending this key square so that the knight can't enter and block my queen side. My priority as Black here, MPK, is to play D6, Bishop E6, Knight D7. The moves could change slightly, but overall you could call my priority development, right? I'm trying to bring out the pieces the best I can. In this case, castling with the king to get away from Knight D6 check is actually bad for our development, because after Black plays Knight D6, we're going to have a hard time bringing those pieces into the game, right? The only Black piece that's really well equipped here to protect that weak square is the king. Hence my move. Now, let's see if things get trickier for FXL after the choice to grab the second pawn, because FXL did grab that pawn, did get checked again, and that's where we're at now. We can immediately give FXL credit for spending some time on their moves. They've spent 10 minutes more on the game than Daniil Dubov over the course of 11 moves, while they've spent almost 11 minutes more over the course of 11 moves. So they're doing a very good job of taking their time. Melt Like Butter wants to see the king come up. And I gotta say, I'm in your camp, Melt Like Butter. This is a very, very beautiful arrangement here. I absolutely love that. Gorgeous position. That said, with Black thinking on their moves, it's not maybe the most likely, right? If Black were blitzing, then yeah, you'd have a very good chance of getting that variation. All right, as Black ponders, we're going to just click around a little bit, see what else we think. This is the King's Indian defense. Looks fine so far for both players. Then we've got... Oops. Already on that game. Then we had this game here. Interesting. Yeah, this is the game where Black started out with D5. No AAA, BBBBB, CCCCC. It is not. You should just play your game, and I don't know if this is a real term or not, but I call it monotasking as opposed to multitasking. You should monotask during your game. You know, just focus on it. You never know when I'll hop to your game and say something faster than you can close the stream, and that could be cheating. But even if it's just me talking about other games, it's just distracting. You can always listen to me some other day or time when you're not playing. You know, there's no need to do many things badly at once. Yeah? All right, cool. Thanks for closing us down. I hope to talk to you another time. And enjoy your game, most of all. Okay, so you guys see this. Black was playing d5 against the English. White trades the pawn. Black moves the queen. Here comes the bonk. White made black wait for it, a whole move, you know. Normally people just auto bonk you, right? With knight c3. White develops the knight. Wait for it. Bonk. Queen moves away. Grabs some center. Bishop f5. Black's playing all the normal moves of the center counter defense, but against the English instead of against 1e4. Interesting. Bishop d2. c6. Still following the line. Yeah, normally in the center counter, white doesn't have an e-pawn. They have a c-pawn. And now they play knight e4, attacking the queen, and trade knights. But here, excellent possibility for white. e4. Very nice find by Campbell. Yeah, this pawn is attacked twice by black and only defended once by white. But the point is that if black takes it with either piece, white will take, uncovering this hidden attack on the queen, and there's no time to capture the knight, right? Because you'll lose the queen. And if black saves the queen, then white will save the knight and be up a piece. So after e4, black had to retreat, and white supports that center. e6, knight d5, queen d8, trades, queen f6. Oh my gosh. Huge opportunity for Campbell. And they are using their time, so they may find it. Anybody in chat fancy a suggestion here for white? Oh no, my queen. A new dad makes their way into the chat room. Wow. Greetings, Nose. I did spend actually a lot of time watching stuff right when I had a newborn, because there was a lot of like holding the baby so that it would sleep because it didn't want to sleep on its own, a lot of bouncing and all that. And it was an opportunity to rewatch Avatar with my partner who was seeing Avatar for the first time. It was an opportunity for me to watch some other things at night as well. Yeah. Everything gets chopped into little bits. This is the moment in my life where I played some Bullet. Nose. Right where you are. We've got a move from Campbell, and Melt Like Butter and Casual Player had the answer here. Let's see if Campbell did. No. That move lets the queen escape. She is low on squares here, right? So it could make sense to attack her. But what squares does she have available? The one she's on and these two. Therefore, the answer was bishop g5. That is a really good pattern to know. It comes up a fair amount in chess openings, honestly, that if a queen recaptures a knight on f6, there are opportunities to set up this bishop trap.
I'll turn the light off. Ready?
Good for you, Nose. Good for you. I think Puzzle Rush didn't yet exist when my first kid was a newborn. And B, I probably didn't even have time for a 3-minute Puzzle Rush, so that's why I was playing Bullet back then. Because she'd pop up in moments, anytime. So we get this trade from white, but it's undesirable. E5, it looks like white used sort of like a tactical means to set up something that they couldn't do. Sometimes when you see a way to do something and it requires tactics to do it, you think because you've seen a tactic, it's a good thing to do. You know what I mean, folks? Have any of you ever done that? You saw like a spiffy way that you could do something that it doesn't look like you can do, so then you became married to the idea of doing it. And then you're evaluating and you're like, I don't know if that's any good for me. And you think, but it's so spiffy. I'm going to go do that thing. Right? So the problem is that this thing is actually very, very undesirable for white. We have, with the move e5, we've set our pawns on dark squares and weakened our own light squares. The queen moves away, and then we trade our best piece, the light squared bishop, for the opponent's light squared bishop, developing their rook, promoting the rook pawn into a knight pawn, which is a more valuable pawn, and leaving ourselves with weak light squares. So this is really unfortunate for white that they found this continuation. And once they found it, of course, they were really feeling like they need to go for it. Yeah. That's happened to me many times. I found some kind of tactical variation and went with it, even though the position that it created was, I thought, that doesn't seem good to me, but maybe it will be. It should be, because I can do this, because I can push my opponent around. And then, of course, it wasn't. Followed by boldly castling queenside. Wow. White still has something going for them. It's that black has poor development. But this bishop has bad prospects with this pawn center, so white's going to have to come up with something pretty cool to use to create problems for black. All right, let's click back to another game. Oh yeah, this one not yet too dramatic. I wanted to get back to Daniil Dubov's game probably. Whoa, lots of action there. Has white gotten back into the game at all? Thanks to black grabbing the pawn on f2. We suspected there would definitely be a chance. Bishop c4. Rook h7. Of course, defending the pawn like a madman, because black has spent so much effort taking a pawn, then they have to keep playing as if pawns really matter. Knight d6. Bishop d4. Knight f7. King c7. Where is this knight going? Like, had black played king here, where was that poor knight headed? After bishop here, I think white should have dealt with that bishop with either c3 or knight f3, developing more. Okay, pawn gets grabbed, knight develops, d5, exploding the position. Whoa. Exchange sacrifice, fancy pants. Simpler moves were probably playable as well, right? Like a rook to e1 defending the knight. As well as knight d4 was another pretty good fancy pants move white could have tried. The advantage of knight d4 is that you actually trade the rook on h1 instead of d1, right? Because when they take, you take, and then takes, and you come here. You could also throw in a really complicated move here, knight check, then rook here. And the potential here is pretty high, actually, that you might come out ahead, because if black doesn't take your knight, you've got two pieces against the rook, so you're way ahead. And if they do take your knight, then one option is to trap that rook in the corner. And this position is, pleasant for white. They're up a pawn. Good bishop, better pawn structure. Everything's in white's favor in this ending. So actually, knight takes d4 might have been a, GM level exclam move right here. But white is on the path to finding moves like that, because they are looking at aggressive and interesting moves. So maybe next time around they'll find knight takes d4 in the position where they played rook d4. Let's see, how long did white spend on this idea? 20 seconds. Yeah, I think that's what's holding Daniil Dubov back. From this move, you can see that they've got creative ideas, that they see a lot of options, but then you have to put some time in it and refine your ideas to go from I've got an idea to I've got 2 or 3 ideas to I'm comparing these 2 or 3 ideas to, oh, this idea looks like the better one. So that's where That's where they need to get at some point. Thank you, Richard HB. Glad you liked it. I had a good time, of course. Black starts to finish up their development. Just the rook left to come out. Good solid move from FXL. Gets checked and has to choose between coming up and dropping back. By the way, we can say that this bishop takes f2 move didn't look very good in this game, right? Do you guys all agree that after bishop takes f2, Black's game seemed to get much harder and suddenly White was doing a lot of menacing things? Knight e6 you're talking about this knight takes d4 line, right? Statement knight d4, bishop d1, and now this knight b5 check, and you're saying knight e6 should also save the knight. I thought so too, but I thought it might lose this knight. That's why I went with what I thought was sort of a simpler variation with knight b5. Because here, king here, if we take this bishop, Black can take here. And it's still kind of nebulous whether or not White's getting enough to make up for it. I think there's a chance that with this knight covering the dark squares and bishop covering the light squares, that White has enough of an attack to still get a decent position. But I wouldn't really bet heavily on that claim. And I thought this line here was simpler. Since the players are 13, 1400. I don't want to get into variations that are too messy, right? I'm trying to do appropriate variations, like basically at their level or one move deeper than their normal level, but not like 4 moves deeper. I'm not going to ask them to calculate something that I wouldn't. Well, you see what I mean, right? In my commentary, I'm not trying to give tons of variations that are way beyond what I would tell a player of this level in a lesson between them and me, right? Sometimes when a really strong player in chat asks a question, I'll go deeper into their variations, of course, that they're asking about. But yeah, knight e6 interrupting this defense. I considered it. There might be a way to make it work, but it's messy, and knight b5 seems simpler. And honestly, even without knight b5, I wanted to say that just this kind of a variation is an interesting option for White, and it's superior to the rook sack on d4. Because the rook sack on d4, we're trading our rook, right? Our rook on d1 when we sack the exchange. Whereas when I play knight takes d4, because of how all the captures and recaptures happen, I'm trading the rook on h1, not the rook on d1. So even if I don't find any intermediate moves for the knight, right, any intermezzos, as you fancily gave us the proper Italian term probably, even if I don't find any fancy moves, this is a superior way of using the resources White has, right? And that's one of the things I wanted to bring to their attention, was that this is, just generally speaking, a better way to be bringing out the White pieces. Okay, so we got the rook sack this way, or exchange sack this way. Then the knight came out. Black brings out the knight. White gives the check. Black correctly comes forward. The reason it's so correct and important to come forward, as FXL did, is that it allows this rook to still get out. Whereas if you get scared about your king safety and walk backwards into here, you still have a lot of work to do to maybe or ever get this rook out of a8. And that's going to make life overall much more difficult for Black. So correct coming out. Knight moves away. Knight e5 looking to maybe trade a piece. Rook f1 from White is a nice developing move looking at a weakness. I like that move quite a lot, actually. That was well found by White. Impressive little move there. Not at all easy for Black to deal with this threat to the f6 pawn. And this endgame, by the way, folks, is going to be very close. Nobody's running away with it. Black has a rook against a knight and a pawn. That's the material balance. That's basically slightly favoring Black. At a GM level, knights kind of fall off in the endgames. And a GM might be able to show that black's advantage is enough to win. Maybe. But at a non-GM level, it would just be fair to say that black has the advantage, but you wouldn't say whether it's, you know, winning or anything. You just say black's got the advantage, but the endgame is close, right? And so they're going to have to play well. And winning this pawn on f6 would be huge for white, right? Because then white's got more pawns on the queen side and more pawns on the king side. So it'll be hard for black to figure out which side of the board they're going to try to gain the advantage on and eventually make a passed pawn. You can't win many endgames without making a passed pawn. So black's going to have to figure out. Yeah, and it looks like this pawn might well drop. If it does, I don't know how black's going to devise a winning plan, right? It's going to be pretty tricky. Excuse me. I'd probably start by trading one knight for black here on f7 just to simplify things a little bit. And that takes some pressure off my b7 pawn and my king. And after trading a knight, I might play the move rook f8. So then when white takes on f6, I can try and tie up white's pieces along the f-file. Basically a little hidden attack, right? So I'm thinking like here, here, check, I drop back. And now my idea is that if you move the knight, I will take your rook. And if you move the rook, maybe I'll take your knight. So I'm hoping that white will be a bit tied up around this knight. And depending what they come up with, I could even attack the knight again with my bishop, and I might be able to win the game for black off of that knight's situation. That's my first thought as to how to approach this as black. Make a trade and then develop the rook, but specifically see if we can't entangle white on the f-file. Here's an alternative, which I don't really like, which would be to retreat the knight to defend the pawn. To me, that leaves the rook kind of stuck over here. Maybe white can win this pawn with one of these pieces here, right? Or, you know, maybe white can do other dynamic things. You know, push these pawns up towards the king, play knight c4, play rook f4, hitting the bishop, and then rook b4, and then go to b7. So this kind of passive move, defending the pawn, feels wrong to me. Like, I think white's gonna get fair chances if black goes for that move. And I think that one trade followed by rook f8 should keep an advantage for black. I don't know if it wins immediately or if it just keeps the advantage. Black leads off with a trade. Should very much agree with. White's going to recapture it. Yes. By the way, I didn't mention this move, f5, trying to defend the pawn that way. That could be a move that's tempting to many people. It won't actually save the pawn, though, right? Because white can play h3, force the bishop here, and then take the pawn. Then black can take to trade off and try and simplify the position. The bishop's attacked, so rook f8 is not good enough. Black can trade off, trying to simplify the position more. But by this point, it's really unclear. Even if white trades the rook, it's really unclear if the rook can beat the single bishop in this ending with pawn majorities on both sides for white. You know, I can imagine this bishop being anywhere on this diagonal here, defending the g-pawn, the king defending the queenside pawns, and I don't know where or how black would attack to try to win this endgame. It looks very hard to do. So I'm not a fan of f5 here. So far, no move played here. Rook f8. Wow. best move I could find. Excuse me. You forgot it was Friday. Yeah, we don't wait on anybody, Falgry, you know. Not even me. You know, when I'm not here, the tournament still starts at 8 o'clock. I saw that you graduated. I saw your graduation announcement going out. And it was very nice. Very nice to see. Yeah, Nose has the least idea what day of the week it is. Rook F6 check. King C7. So now White has to White plays that pretty quickly. White has to play some move that watches out for bishop to H5, trying to win the knight. So White tries Rook H6. Hey, Shirgorov, thank you. Thank you very much. And I think Black has basically an absolute knockout move against Rook H6. I think this move does not work for White, who continues to build up time on their clock. I made a guess, Shirogorov, that you would be talking about Chess 960, Fisher Random. Oh, look at this! FXL spotted it. FXL is like, you know, zoomed in on this game, paying attention. And there's the resignation, and you see FXL with half as much time as White, and that works out for FXL. GG. They play Rook takes, not Rook H6, letting the knight escape, but Rook takes knight, leaving this rook undefended. So if White even takes back this rook, Black takes that rook, not the bishop, and ends up with a full extra rook in this endgame. And that is going to be a win for Black. Yeah. So, GG to FXL. Good job using your time. Good job spotting some tactical opportunities here. And, oh yeah, daylight savings kicked in for me, Far Eastern. That's exactly right. So maybe click on one of our other games here. Or Campbell. Yeah, let's check in on Campbell's game, because this was one we'd followed a bit earlier. So Campbell went Queen B3, pressuring B7. Black defended it, and Campbell got castled. And here I was saying, you know, Black's got a great outpost here. White's pawn structure is blocking in this bishop. The rook's open. So I was saying White, Campbell is going to have to come up with something to get something going early on in this game. And they started with bishop G5, looking to trade the bad bishop for the good bishop, which will weaken two possible squares for White's knight. Very good start, Campbell. Good job on that move. I approve. H3, taking the pressure off the rook so this rook can re-centralize if it wants to. A very reasonable choice by Campbell. Black castles and Campbell strikes. Knight F7. Yes, yes, yes. Good night, casual player. Good to see you. How crazy was the idea of rushing these pawns? Ask knows. Like H4 with the idea of G4 and then maybe H5. Not crazy at all, knows. I did sort of expect H4 actually here. In terms of my own priorities, though, I wasn't yet sure if I want to go G4 or not. My next move for White would have been King to B1, probably. Depending what Black does. Obviously, all this depends, right? But I was thinking that King B1 would be a prudent tempo before making further decisions. There's also this interesting move, Queen F3, right? which could be played trying to keep black from castling queenside by pressuring the f7 square that the king's busy defending. If you could convince black to castle kingside, then of course h4, h5 will become a great plan, even without the g-pawn, I would think. So I wouldn't say h4, g4, etc. is crazy, right? I would say h4 is a logical early move, king b1 logical, and then you have to decide, are you playing for h5? Are you playing for rook h3 to c3? Are you playing for rook c1? Are you playing for d5, queen f3? We have to be a little flexible about those options, right? Bishop takes g5 was probably bad for black, but we can understand why they did it. It sort of improved this knight. But they did it because they wanted to play knight d7. They wanted to develop this piece, and they didn't want the king stuck in the center of the board, right? So bishop g5, what are plausible moves for black? This is a move people might play, trying to force the issue and control the g5 square. But against this move, if white just plays h4, rook h5 seems just kind of stuck there. Like it's not really making a huge impact. So another option, if black just wants to hold this bishop tension, would have been knight a6. That move actually, with the queen defending this way, allows black to castle. And once black's castled, the knight will try to go through either b4 or c7 to get to d5. And my first guess would be that that's the strongest way for black to have handled the questions around the bishops on e7 and g5. Develop this knight and get the king over that way. Yeah. All right, so black says, I can't defend the rooks. I can't save them. I can't defend d6. Decides not to defend e6 either. So now white's got a choice of all kinds of treats. I would say 4 obvious candidate moves. The knight is attacked by the queen, so I don't think we should play some random building move with the rooks, right? And just give this up. But I say white's got kind of 4 really tempting candidate moves. And maybe I'll throw it out there to the chat to see if you all have any thoughts or preferences on how to pick in this position here. Campbell's still using a lot of time, but not like flagging a lot of time. Not like it's blunderous, but like it's a good thing. Spending some time looking at moves. Seems white's already made a choice. I'm going to take a sneak peek ahead. Aha, I see what white chose. Yeah, Maya, those are the 4 candidate moves we're thinking about. Exactly right. Okay. So basically, one of these 4 moves is very wrong. Let's eliminate that one first, okay? Knight d6, saying like, oh, I believe in the power of my knight. I'll go to this outpost. This one is very wrong. Because black can take with the rook, you take with the pawn, and take with the queen. Now you've just traded the knight on f7 and the pawn on e5 for a rook that you could have taken in one move. Okay? So that's the one line. This one is really, really wrong. It's like either you didn't consider rook takes d6, or you just, just didn't compare properly, right? This is kind of a hallucination kind of move. That said, I'm mentioning it because a lot of people would play it. Then you could take either rook, and then when black recaptures, you could probably take on e6. So it's a question of, do you want to send their rook to h8, or do you want to send their rook to d8? Probably h8's the worst square because you already have a pawn on h3 and your d pawn is weaker. So for those who wanted to take the rook on h8, I would think that that is best, and you can go here, here, and then here, and grab the pawn as well, right? Now me, as a fancy guy, my first instinct was to take on e6 check first. And it does work out this time, but there's not really any advantage to this move, because any move black plays, you would then want to take here. And the one thing that could go wrong is black could block in some way that creates some kind of threat, and you end up not having time to take a rook. Here, it's fine because your knight's on two different rooks, so they can't skip away from your knight while recapturing. So in this position, queen takes e6 and knight takes h8 are identically good. But I would say actually if your instincts are to capture the rook first and then follow up with the pawn after they recapture, that's probably better than my instinct to first look at the unnecessarily complicated move when you could have just taken the rook to begin with. Even though my calculation is good enough to now see that the moves transpose. If my calculation were a little less good, queen e6 has some blunder potential to it, whereas knight h8, nada. That gets the job done. So here's the live position. Black played knight d7, and white is thinking again, or I misclicked. There it just came in. Queen takes g6. So white has garnered such a big advantage and is still being careful and using their time. A minute on queen e6 check, or a minute and a half. A minute and 20 on taking on g6. So still taking things seriously despite the advantage. Sometimes people get the advantage, they get carried away, right? They start thinking about their opponent resigning instead of about what moves they should play. Oh, they don't transpose nose? Oh, I think I know what nose is saying. If queen e6 check, queen d7 from black, you don't have an option of taking this pawn. Maybe. You might have to trade and then take here, and you can't take the pawn. Yeah. I didn't think that's too important because trading queens would be great for white when you're up in exchange and a pawn, and these are just double isolated pawns. It's not such a big deal to get one of them. But yeah, there's a small difference. You could also calculate queen g6 here if you wanted to, nose, and see if you can still catch one of the rooks because they're both attacked if you really have a huge appetite for that g pawn. But I think that this position is well within the range of positions where your advantage is big enough to win, and you would probably be happier to take queens off the board and then take the rook than to go adventuring for a double isolated pawn. I think you would feel like you've got enough to win the game, and you would just take your opponent's pieces off the board to make it simple. All right, we got knight f8 from black, and Campbell fully in control here. A nice detail would be queen e8 check, actually, with the knight blocking the rook off in the corner like that. That's going to advance white's winning process a little bit. And, of course, any move of the queen to safety is fine as well, right? They're not particularly better or worse than each other, any of these moves. Just, you know, don't lose the queen here to the knight. Don't put the queen next to the rook, etc. Misclicking is painful, Richard. I'm sorry to hear that. E8. Nice. And there we go. White goes to E8, trades the queens off the board. Campbell advances the pawn. And trading pawns isn't super important in general in endgames. When you have the advantage, the key thing is to trade off your opponent's pieces. And then sometimes you can win their pawns with your extra pieces or so forth. But d5 is very nice here because white doesn't have a fully open file for the rooks. So this is a very good move from the principle of development. We're developing the rook on h1, hopefully, in a move or two. Right? And that's what's so nice about the move d5 from Campbell, is that this piece still needed to get developed or used in some way, and now it looks like that's going to happen. The other thing white could have considered doing in a position like this is advancing these pawns to sort of take more space with them, get closer to making a passed pawn, or run the king into the middle of the board to defend and support all those pawns in the area where you're then planning to advance. You can do that first, right? But d5, to get the rooks involved, the rooks are more powerful than the pawns or the king. So I think this is a very, very good choice for white. Probably the number one choice that I would have made would be this d5, rook d5. I like it very much. Hey folks, Richard's basically asking if anyone would like to lose a game to Richard. I'm just kidding. Richard just wants another game. Okay, the rook gets behind the passed pawn. So I approve that Campbell wants to use this rook, but I think it would be much stronger on d1 actually here. In this case, you're trying to queen this pawn, but maybe black, can use the knight to block you. And black does. Whereas if you bring the rook here, you're threatening something like rook d8, tying down all these pieces. And if the knight comes out, then you go rook check into the 7th rank. If the king comes up, rook check in the 6th rank. You can see the action of these rooks. They're loose and they're wild, right? So the king would probably have to drop back like this. And, you can do something like this. This rook's super strong on the 7th rank. This rook's still got this file available as well. You could maybe double on the 7th rank at some point. So this is, I would consider the most active way to use the white rooks, the most powerful way to use the white rooks. Choice in the game, rook behind the passed pawn. I mean, that's a famous thing that you're supposed to put rooks behind passed pawns. White plays rook e4. I think dreaming of f4, f5. If I were black, I would play rook f8 to say no to that. But black played rook d8, which is going to allow white a rook trade if they want it, which I think that they do. If white's trying to be super precise, like a GM would play rook c4 check and then trade the rook. But that's a level of precision that you would not expect under 1800 or 2000, really, like ever, to be so precise. Seems good enough to just trade a rook, right? A trade of rooks is basically the happiest thing that could happen to white. So Campbell, if they understand rook and rook versus rook and knight endgames, Campbell right now should be super happy, right? That's how it should be. Campbell should be happy right now. Move played. Rook c4 check. Oh my goodness. Campbell is really staying very focused and attentive on this game despite the advantage. Campbell never rushes a single move, by the way. You know, not even like captures, recaptures, nothing gets blitzed out. Everything gets a moment of consideration. Yeah. Even this very clear rook trade. I have seen several examples nose, not tons, but I've seen a couple examples, including one last week, of sort of beginners or newer players, you know, maybe not like a full noob, but, you know, somebody in the 1,000 range versus the 2,000 range, trying fancy in-between moves instead of, let's say, a simple recapture or simple like saving of an attacked piece. And I've seen it go wrong as recently as once last week, I think. But what I said then was that the fact that they're trying those moves, right? The fact that they're trying those moves, I take as a really good sign, right? Because a lot of people can't tell what's wrong with those intermediate moves. They can't calculate the consequences, but they simply don't try them out of fear of getting something wrong, right? They just play all these safety moves all the time. And I think the person who's trying out the fancier moves is in line to improve more / faster, right? Even if it's like failing gloriously or horribly, right? I think not being afraid to try out things gives you more room to learn from the things you try. So when I see somebody trying to be tactical, no matter how bad it fails, I think that's a good sign. That's a good sign. All right, by the way, nice technique here from Campbell, as some folks mentioned in chat, that it's time to push. Says Stamen, right? F4 comes preparing F5. Then finally we can go E6 despite the knight once this pawn's here to help. So it's coming. Black attacks the rook. White attacks a pawn that they could take with check. Black takes time to defend it. And now F5. Perfect. Keeping the knight back and starting to prepare the further advance of this pawn. King B7. Pawn keeps going. And honestly, it's pretty much perfect play the last many moves here by Campbell. This whole endgame has been played with a very high degree of technique and focus on what you're supposed to be doing. Very, very well done. And yeah, we get the resignation here from Blake, and just big congrats to Campbell. Bravo. Good game. You know, there was one moment where things didn't go in a good direction from white with the E5, right? And this light squared bishop trade. And then, you know, the game's very complicated, and Campbell found a way to not let black simply play knight D7, castles queenside, and have a good position. put some pressure on immediately and was immediately rewarded. And then there was a material lead, and it was just a question of their technique, which was nigh perfect. You know, one little note that here this rook would be even more active on d1, or maybe a similar move, king b1 or king d2, to put this rook on the open c file. That I didn't notice at the time, but it might be almost as good as, similarly good as rook d1. The reason rook d1 is just overwhelmingly the best move is because you threaten rook d8, and if the knight moves, you've got rook d7. So I think this will be like the very best move, but you know, king d2, centralizing the king towards these pawns, and then rook c1, chasing this king from d7. That's basically going to be equally good, because anytime the knight moves, you'll have d7 again, because this king will have been chased to the b file by the other rook. So, yeah, maybe king d2, I could even imagine it being, you know, 1/10 of a pawn better by a supercomputer's estimation. I'm going to check for fun. For a second, it said king d2 was the best. Now it says rook hd1. Now it bounces back. King d2 plus 6.62. Rook hd1 plus 6.51. Ha! 1/10 of a pawn. Nailed it. Okay, technically 11/100ths of a pawn. But this was very, very good technique from white in general. Rook behind the passed pawn with these pawns to follow as well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this technique. There's nothing wrong with any of the moves white played. Just there was one moment with a slightly better move, period. Very, very little. Now, let's swap our attention over to the 1600 plus group and check out some of the dojo's heavy hitters. Bum, 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 bum. All right, so we've got Kraken Boy, Ping Pong Savage. Maybe I'll check out this game, Ping Pong Savage and Emmanuel. Actually, let me open up a few of the games and then sort of see what I'm most excited by. So this one here is Mouse Slip against Dr. Gratitude, with white down a pawn in what looks like a French defense, right? And white's just played rook c2, and this queen is really, really busy with some work. So see what Dr. Gratitude comes up with there. We've got checkmate versus where is the bread, and a tremendous position for white, right? With this d6 square completely controlled. These pieces are boxed in. Rooks are out and looking angry. This position here is probably ripe for calculation, honestly. There's a chance that white has a direct win somewhere in this position. Okay, so that's the situation over there. And then this Kraken Boy game. Oh yeah, which we saw. Did we see this a moment ago, or was it a different one? No, it's just very similar. This is a advanced French as well, but without the B pawn having been sacrificed. Oh, there goes the B pawn now. G6. There's just no way to cover it on this dark square. So big mistake from white was in this position here, advancing A4, leaving this pawn weak. B5 was played specifically to nail this pawn down. White didn't yet fully realize what was coming and chooses not to trade, which would be relatively better. And there goes the pawn. Black takes another pawn, and white goes for some counterplay, because what else can you do? when the opponent gets too far ahead, right? All right, let's get oriented to this game here, which might serve as a main game for us. Looks like it's an offbeat French defense. White leaves the pawn on e4 hanging, just develops the bishop to this nice long diagonal that's kind of weakened by e6 and d5. I mean, they don't like really weaken it, but they don't control any squares on that diagonal. They don't block it, right? And then if this bishop develops, the pawn could be lost. So it's very logical. I assume a critical variation is if black takes this pawn, it's kind of a gambit that white's going to try to win back, I assume. But black just developed in the game and then tried to block in the bishop. So then white grabs a bunch of space. Black overprotects d4, so this piece won't become good. d3 locking in the structure. I mean, probably other options for white as well here. Yeah, it's been a lot of Frenches recently, Far Eastern. I agree with you. So black tries to grab some more space over here as well with f5, but white is looking pretty compact and low on weaknesses at the moment. All these pieces ready to fight in the center. My eye first casts over here to knight c2. Just because if rook c1, there's knight a2, right? So there's not a lot of ways to cover that pawn. I suppose knight c4. And if black keeps chasing it, the knight can go to e5, which is okay. But what about takes? White had previously planned to put the knight there, I think. Queen e4, knight c2 looks abysmal. So pawn takes. Excuse me. Now white can't castle because of d3 check. So I'd expect some move with the bishop, kind of setting up for d3. Certainly looks like a fair option for black right here after knight d2. Definitely an option. This is back to the live position. It's move 10. White spent almost 20 minutes on knight d2, by the way, folks. 19 minutes and 26 seconds on knight d2. Wow. The big think of the game so far. Absolutely, Shergrove. Go for it. Hey, ZJ. Let's think. Options for black other than knight to b4. a5 would be a typical move, grabbing more space over here as well. Black could play like a super explosion move with e5. Probably implying a pawn sack. I'm not really expecting that to be great for black. But I do want a little more space for this queen and bishop, right? So the rooks can move freely so the queen gets out of the way of their lines of communication. I don't know if there's any option to transfer the queen over this way. It doesn't feel like she's got free squares where she won't get harassed, but maybe she could. A side and H side. The only proper way. Okay. So that was, something that I wasn't acquainted with until this week, Shirogorov. I think you may have noticed that in past commentary before this week, I'd never heard of A side and H side. I just happened to see somewhere. You know what? I think I was like looking at the YouTube comments on the broadcast, and somebody mentioned that they'd looked it up on Wikipedia. And then on Wikipedia, it said that A side and H side was whatever the closest thing to official there is for the term, right? And so that caused me to well, no, Dabo, this is for Fisher Random specifically. Then in Fisher Random, it's called castling H side and A side. But sometimes in Fisher Random, your king starts on what we are very used to calling the queen side, and the queen starts on what we are very used to calling the king side. So then if you say, I'm going to castle king side, it's rather confusing because you're actually castling your king to the side of the board that has the queen on it and away from the side of the board you're on. Same thing with short castling and long castling, right? Sometimes castling to the H side in Fisher Random is going to be a super long castle versus a short castle. So, yeah, there is maybe some importance to figuring out the most precise term for it, and this H side and A side is apparently the Wikipedia recommendation, and Shirogorov is saying that they've thought about it and they now believe it's absolutely the best option. All important seems very strong. Hey, Ziz, how you doing? Lucky J and AAABBBCCC just completing their game. Right on. Another idea we'd come up with, Dabo, was like the right side and the left side, but that kind of implies that you're looking at the board from white's side, let's say, right? If you were looking at it from black's side, then the right side would be the left side and the left side would be the right side, so that could be confusing as well. So I don't know if there's any term other than, H side or GH side versus A, B side that makes the most, that's completely clinically useful. I could imagine you could call it like G1 or G8 castling and C1 or C8 castling. I think that would be reasonable, but there are situations where you talk about it outside of castling as well, right? Like, let's say, another example, you're talking about somebody who is doing a pawn storm on this side of the board, right? In Fisher Random, right? So let's say you're talking about a pawn storm over here, but it's a Fisher Random position where the king started on B1 and the queen started on G1. Would you say that white is pawn storming the king side? That wouldn't really make sense, Dabo. So that's kind of what Shirogorov's talking about. So we'll see. I'll think about it some more, Shirogorov. I don't always, I guess it depends on the complexity of the question. Sometimes I make up my mind quickly. Sometimes it takes me a long time to make up my mind. I haven't yet made up my mind on this. But as you can see, it's a question I've been asking myself this week, so it's percolating. You have thought it through completely. Well, that's good for you. I can see you have that certainty that I don't have yet. I'm not sure I understand your question, Tweezer. You know what I kind of liked Shirogorov was there was one position we had today where the king and queen were like side by side on f1 and g1, and on the other side of the board it was like, you know, knight, knight, bishop kind of situation. And I thought it was kind of fun to call this side of the board the royal side and this side of the board, you know, the tiers monde or something, you know, the middle class side of the board or something. I thought that one was funny to call one side the royal side, but I understand like position by position that all changes. Yeah, the royal side. Dabo could say the loyal side for the other side, the pieces that follow the king and queen. Yeah, it felt kind of fun. It doesn't solve all problems, and it could be confusing once the pieces have moved out. People might not remember where they started if you were watching more than one game at a time. But it had that fun feeling to it. All right, Emmanuel. Maybe this player's name, Emmanuel, with 3 L's, is kind of a pun on Emmanuel Lasker, because there's an extra L, like for Lasker, but it's spelled manual, like Lasker's Manual of Chess, Lasker's most famous chess book. Emmanuel, after a while, chose bishop to e8, creating space for the queen, and the bishop that was blocked by this pawn chain can now come around another way. Perfectly reasonable. It is one of the moves I had considered a little bit in my head. Online tweezer tickle, you can either drag your king to the rook like that. You see me putting it on the rook. Or you can drag it to the square it's supposed to go to, and that'll also cause castling. If I click on the king, I can then also click on the square I want it to go to without the drag. Same thing, I can click on the king, but then I can't click on the rook because then it thinks I want to move the rook. So if I click on the king, I have to click on G1 or click on the king, C1. You see? Mm-hmm. I hear you, Shirogorov. In 960, you could have the king already on G1, and the only way to castle would be to move the king onto the rook. So you'd have to do a drag and drop. You couldn't do a click, actually, tweezerticle. Yeah. If the king were on G1 in 960, you'd have to click on the king and then click on the rook, or drag the king onto the rook. But you wouldn't be able to move the king to G1. It is, Jay, it is. Yeah. Both wonderful and brutal. Like life itself, you know? Life is also brutal. A lot of the things you can say about chess, you can then say, like life. And then they come out being just as wise, maybe even a little bit weightier, you know? A lot of people have compared chess to life in various metaphors for a long time, right? You know, things like a single mistake can ruin a chess game or a life. The only difference between chess and life, chess is more idealized. You have all the information all the time. You have equal resources to others. Yeah, there's probably other differences, but yeah, those are some big ones. Yeah, Shirogorov, you're always invited to share your opinions on here. I hope you know that. Exactly. Poker players can do the same thing with poker. I'm sure tennis players can do it with tennis. Yeah, that's very, very different in life, for sure. People do not have the same resources. That might be the best one, ZJ. Yeah, that life and chess, they both have this sort of consequences of what you do. But life has a lot more chaos and randomness as well, right? Compared to chess. So in life, sometimes you play the best moves, so to speak, but because you don't have perfect information, as pointed out by Far Eastern, because you don't have perfect information, or because something random happens, or a fourth or fifth player that you didn't realize was part of your game intercedes in your game in some way, you may not get a good result from playing, from making a good decision or a seemingly good move that anyone else analyzing the situation would agree, yeah, that's the best move. So the consequences are not as directly linked to your choices, right? In chess, it's like very clear your choices, your consequences, etc. In life, there's all kinds of noise, right, around that link. Fianchetto, it's pronounced like K, yeah. Yeah, I think when I was first reading my first chess books, I didn't know if it should be fianchetto or fianchetto either. And I do agree, I think it comes from Italy. Bishop e8, knight g5, saying no bishop h5, maybe go back to d7. White's like, could I politely suggest you return that bishop to d7 and, reclog your queen? Yeah, good idea, ping pong. Good idea, ping pong. Let's see if Emmanuel has a response to this. I guess queen d7 would be one idea, right? You defend the square from the knight with your queen, and then later you could play h6 and still bring out the bishop the way you want to either g6 or h5. Yeah. So I think that's like a plausible answer here in this blocked up position. Although, if white takes, then there's knight e6. You don't get the pawn, but you get the square. Oh, David didn't look far enough at first. So queen d7 fails to ef5. For sure. Hey, Boondock Striker. Welcome home to your home, right? I didn't know you were an attorney, Shergrove. Interesting. When you get really frustrated, Shirogorov, do you scream at people? Queen d7, though, was Emmanuel's choice. Same move as my first instinct, right? But that's the thing where you want to go deep in classical chess. You want to go deep. You want to not just come up with an idea, right? But push yourself. Test it, right? What's the opponent going to do about it? Right? My instincts aren't always going to be right. Ping Pong and Emmanuel, their instincts aren't always going to be right. Gotta test it. Queen d7. Oof. If Ping Pong double checks this move, if Ping Pong doesn't just accept on face value that it's defended e6, if Ping Pong calculates and looks for things, then e takes looks like a decent opportunity to me. Let me double check a line here. EF5, EF5, knight e6. What if black tries to deflect the queen to take the knight? Then from white's side, taking the rook, attacking the queen, bishop takes, knight takes, and white comes out with a mass of extra pieces. You never yell at people in real life. Okay. I just noticed that sometimes when you're well, first of all, you're a passionate person. Like, I can tell you care a lot about the things you care about, which is true for me as well, and not necessarily a good or bad thing. I just notice it. You're very passionate, among other things, about Chess 960 or Fisher Random or freestyle chess. But also sometimes you write in these like all caps, which is sort of like, I think, internet speak for screaming. Yeah, I hope it's decent, Boondock Striker. Fibbits, you got beaten in an English. Very frustrating. Ziz, somebody under 1600 must have put themselves in that section for some reason. Caps is for italics. Oh, okay, gotcha. It's like this is the emphasized part, yeah. In legal briefs, they sometimes put like whole sentences in like italics and stuff like that, don't they? I don't know if briefs is the right word for it, but sometimes in legal documents they use they often have like full sentences in italics, huh? Yeah. Oh, and you used the word brief too, so I might not have gotten the word wrong there for you. You got beaten like a bongo drum. Your loss to FXL changed your acceptance into the dojo. What do you mean by that, Jay? We covered the game, by the way, so you can go back in time in the video and see my thoughts on the game. We looked at much of it, I think. A good chunk of it, at least. And there was one time, Shirogorov, where I thought that you were angry versus passionate. Maybe you can correct me on this one time. But I think it was we were live recording the Dojo talk about the greatest American chess players, and we didn't rank Kamsky. Am I wrong? Am I getting this wrong? That's my memory of one day where I thought, I think Shirogorov's like really angry today. But even there, was I wrong? Were you just passionate? Okay, so even that was not anger. Well, then I guess, yeah, I let this serve as a lesson to all of us that we can misread people's tone on the internet. I really thought that Shirogorov was mad that day. I really did. I would have guessed 3-1 or something, 75% chance at least that Shirogorov was angry. Maybe 80% chance. You play as Daniil Dubov, yeah. Did we use Aronian? We did not, Janond. Yeah, we didn't use Aronian on our list of greatest American players. It was tricky. One of the trickiest things of that podcast was deciding who counted or who didn't, Because like Frank Marshall, for example, one of the most famous American players of all time, so to speak, American of all time, when we did our research, we found out that he lived in Canada I might not remember this now a year later, but I feel like he lived in Canada from about age 11 to 20. And the odds are that he did like a huge percentage of his chess growth in that time, right? So I was saying like, Frank Marshall asterisk, but do we or don't we include him in the list, right? It was pretty tricky. Canada is not currently a United States state, luckily. Yeah, so Frank Marshall's born in the U.S. and was many-time U.S. champion. Maybe 5-time U.S. champion. Maybe 7-time, something like that. One of the highest. But he almost certainly did some fundamental parts of his chess development not in the U.S. and not just like one little part. For all we know, he went from like 1200 to 2300 while in Canada. So, that would be like 90% of his chess development as a player. Yeah, making Kamsky homeless is kind of is partly evil with our approach, right? But it is a problem with our approach that when he came to the US, he was already one of the top players in the world. That's sort of a challenge, right? There's basically no easy answer on some of those options, I thought. But yeah, it's a good question, Shirogrov. That's another question. As an example, ZJ, we did not count Wesley So on our list of greatest American players because we considered that he'd done most of his chess development before he moved to the US. Yeah, so he wasn't considered. Do I think I could match Morphy in a match today? If he wasn't allowed to study AAA, if he wasn't allowed to catch up with modern players, I think I would defeat Morphy in a match today. Yes. And 10 years ago, I would have annihilated him because I was, pre the sleep deprivation of my kids. Right? But AAA, Morphy's like a genius on like a 10 million higher level than me, right? In chess. So I don't know if he would need a week to catch up with me or a month or like a day. Right? So the stipulation on that claim is like he's not allowed to do any catching up, right? He can't look at any of my games, even though I've studied all of his games. He can't look up any opening manuals, read any modern chess books, right? He just has to be exhumed from the grave and sit down at the board. And yeah, I could beat him. Yeah, you give him any time to process the last century and a half of information, and he'd obviously be better than me after a pretty short time. By the way, look how this game went. Straight down our variation, folks. Ping pong found E takes F5. Calculation checked Emmanuel. Emmanuel took back knight E6. Now black could say, oh, shoot, I've made a miscalculation. Let me reevaluate and try and keep the game going. Instead, they just play a tactical move, hoping just a Hail Mary, knight F8, and they resign. So, after knight E6, you could save the bishop, give an exchange, and just keep playing the game, right? There's no need to be lost in one more move. Understood, Shirogorov, but somebody asked me the question, and I gave them the answer. I was just following my policy of trying to answer even difficult questions. Yeah, could I beat Morphy in 960? Shirogorov's not going to like my answer, AAA, BBB, CCC, but yes, I could. It would be close, I think. I don't think I could beat Capablanca or Lasker. I think I could beat Steinitz, and that Lasker is the first historical player who would beat me. That's my estimation. I mean, if you could bring old players back, you'd have more interesting matchups than me against them. I'm ready, Shirgorov. Although, I mean, you should know, like, me and David Howell don't chat regularly. This is the first time we met, and I don't know if and when I'll have the opportunity to work with him again. So, yeah. But, you know, if the opportunity ever presents itself, I can certainly share it. Okay, that's good to hear, Shirgorov. I thought it was good too. I really enjoyed working with him. But one never knows for sure oneself, right? Like, I don't really know what it's like to watch my commentary. So I never know with any certainty. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Remember this moment, folks? In this position here, you guys can you can see the errors that I had before. My first thought on this position here between Mouse Slip and Gratitude was that this queen might be a little overworked, right? So, knight a5. Hitting the queen, looking to win something. Ah, but black does have the move rook c8 to try and get out, huh? And if knight b3, rook d8, black's basically losing a full piece. So black just traded, and the white queen could keep the pawn safe. Okay, good play. Good play. Black makes room for the rook to join the c file. Makes sense. I mean, one always has to wonder if, like, you could just go directly queen c4 since you're up a pawn, right? And in fact, if white takes, you can play an in-between move. If we get fancy, right? This queen here is living in the 2020s economy. She needs 2 jobs. Protect pawns, protect rooks. Queen c4, queen c4. We can even play a fancy move, and then we're up 2 pawns for black, you know, so well on the way to a winning advantage. So queen c4 was definitely a thought here for Dr. Gratitude, but they played queen c6. White kicks that bishop back, taking the pressure off e3. And of course, black wanted this file. And white's looking to do something a little dynamic, get something going against the king. Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense for sure. Now, for black, I'd be tempted to play something like queen c3 or queen c2, and I think that's what black did in the game, actually. Because I hate bringing my opponent's pieces to better squares. You guys know what I mean? Like, I hate doing that for my opponent. Look at the knight on d2, right? Do you see that knight? And how it's not so good? And then I do something like this, and my opponent's knight is here? Good Lord. Absolute pet peeve for me. So, something like queen c2. By the way, no best for the jury. Over on YouTube, Scott Stewart is saying good game to you. I guess they either enjoyed playing with you or just wanted to compliment you on playing well. Maybe even both. So queen c2. That's in the style of what I would have done here. Pawn takes here. Recaptures with a pawn. I approve. The knight retreats, and now I would snag my trade as black, I think, right? Okay, still black's move. Yeah, so I'm thinking I would consummate this queen trade at this point. Get it done. I think Stamen white sacked a pawn very early in this game in the opening. So you're saying we can switch the label, but never say all three of the labels at the same time. If it were up to me, Shirogorov, I would just say Fisher Random. Like, I think that's what the name should be, and I think there should be one name. But I am being slightly sensitive. This is not my normal way of being, but I'm being slightly sensitive to the fact that the organizers of the freestyle tour might want us to use the word freestyle. So there's that piece, right? And I do want to participate in the commentary. So although normally I don't give a hoot what other people think about things and I just say what I think I should, in this case, I make a conscious effort to sometimes say freestyle. I agree, no best for the jury. I don't think it's a good name. Especially since the game already has two good names. Fisher Random, the first one, the best. Chess 960, the second one, perfectly acceptable and pretty well recognized by now. So why we would add another name is just beyond me. But I would just say, you know, even though it's not my normal way, like, I'm saying freestyle basically out of, like, a desire for them to be happy with me. Yeah, there is now a fourth aim. Chess 9LX, also horrendous. Yeah. Oh, freestyle was also used for centaur chess. That's true, no best for the jury. I've heard of that. Fisher Random is maybe a no because we probably canceled Fisher, and you don't know whether or not we've canceled Fisher. I haven't canceled Fisher. Right, 2 words to describe a format. Yeah. That would be fun, checks. Yeah. Yes, it is, Donnie. It's a classical tournament on a Friday evening. I think we've probably talked about it on the podcast sometimes, Jesse, Kostya, and I. But I don't think that that the trio of us have Fisher canceled. It is very fun, Donnie. You got that right. Oh, man. Dr. Gratitude went for the pawn instead of the trade. He wanted to be 2 pawns up, or she, or they, wanted to be 2 pawns up to assure the win. That makes sense. Donnie, it's just you play anytime you want to. It's a 24-hour open space to just get paired with somebody. I don't know what time zone you're in or anything like that. I feel like we're meeting for the first time maybe. But the tournament's just totally open. It's set up as a 24-hour arena. I'm a little cautious to say arena because some people think arena means you try and play as many games as possible and get 1 million points. But a 24-hour classical arena, if you played it the way other people play 1-hour blitz arenas or 2-hour blitz arenas, you might hurt yourself. So we're not encouraging that. We're just making... The point of it being 24 hours is so that it can accommodate people in different time zones to still get a game. You're in Pacific. Okay, so like me. Yeah. So basically, you could play a game on Saturday afternoon in this arena. It goes from 8 p.m. on Friday to 8 p.m. on Saturday. I don't know how far I wanted to wade into this Nazi conversation, but yes, I think a Jew could be a Nazi. I believe one of the main Nazis in history was Hitler, and I believe that Hitler was half Jewish, right? No? Is that incorrect information I was fed as a kid? Anyway, I definitely think a Jewish person could be a Nazi, but I don't know that Fischer was a Nazi. Fischer was just somebody who had some anti-Semitic theories. Lucky J says, "Don't get to know your heroes. You'll find something horrible or crazy in their past, huh?" All right, take care, Jay. Oh, that's cool, Donnie. You've just joined our training plan. Nice. Let's see a little bit more how this game is going before new people think all we do is talk about Nazism or something. In the Chess Dojo. Queen F3 going for counterplay. Uh-oh. Now we're like, did I really need that second pawn? Or did I need to stop White's counterplay? Fischer had some anti-American thoughts, yeah. But a lot of times when people call so-and-so anti-American or something, it's they've got different versions of what they want America to be like, right? And, they have their own thought of what should be American, and they would be pro whatever that is. Hitler was not Jewish, says Stamen. Okay. Fischer was Jewish, says Stamen. Isn't there even some question about who Fischer's father was, Stamen? I'm not like a great historian. I feel like there was some question about maybe two possible fathers for Fischer. Maybe if his mother was Jewish, that's not an important question. Anyway, we have Shirogrov saying that any sort of sporting figure or legend should be judged within the context of what they did in their sport or game and not for anything off the board. If somebody asks you, what do you think of Pete Sampras, they're kind of asking you about Pete Sampras as a tennis player, not whether Pete Sampras was a misogynist or something like that. Which luckily, as Jay Lolo says, I have no idea if Pete Sampras was a misogynist or not. Jay Lolo says, don't get to know your heroes too much because you might not be happy with everything you find out. So I have no idea. All I know is that Pete Sampras won a very large percentage of matches against my favorite tennis player, Andre Agassi. And he was darn good. And every time it was like break point, he would hit another damn ace. Till I wished that aces, like opening theory, weren't part of the game. I exaggerate slightly. Aces are a reasonable part of the tennis game. Just not my favorite part. Okay, so that's Shirogorov's overall perspective, right? So, yeah, for example, like BBB's scenario is kind of a scenario I thought of asking Shirogorov, right? Like, so even if somebody is a murderer, you just say they're a great runner or a great baseball player or a great basketball player or something. Rook C7, that was the only remedy I saw. But the fact that Dr. Gratitude spent 7 minutes on that move speaks to some lack of confidence. Now knight c3, hitting the queen and headed to d5. Oh, Dabo, I didn't know you were Jewish. I've always, for some reason, thought that you were Canadian. I understand being Canadian and Jewish are not mutually exclusive. Oh, no vest for the jury says there's a way out. Rook takes c3. Huh? You're in New York City. Okay. More geographically famous for having Jews than Canada, though again, you could be in New York City and not be Jewish. You could be Jewish and be in Canada. Totally possible. Exactly, no best for the jury. If you look deeper at your idea, there is a refutation around here with a back rank mate. So knight c3. Dr. Gratitude brought the queen into the middle of the board. White played knight b5 instead of d5. That's a really fun question, Lucky J. I am also interested in that question. How long will people sit at a red light that doesn't change? That's such a cool question. I'm really happy to see I'm not the only person who sat around thinking about that question. Wait, what if everybody thinks about it and no one's ever mentioned it until Lucky J? How many of you have thought about this question before? How long you would sit at a red light that never changes, or what other people would do? I am 0% French, approximately 0% French, Richard. I don't know of any French ancestry. Of course, if you go back, 1,000 generations and 10,000 years, you could be from anywhere. But I did learn French when I was 4 years old, and I've passed it on to my kids. And because we live in the US where they'll pick up English on their own or have picked up English on their own, I never speak to them in English. That's my little present to them. Chex once waited through 3 cycles. Ash will wait up to 5 minutes. Donnie once waited 5 minutes at a light. Now they know it never changes. And so they can just go through it. Stamen has sat there and about 4 minutes before going. Yeah, I'm the fastest of anyone so far. So I waited 1 cycle. And then I was like, clearly this light doesn't work. And I went. Yeah. So basically, I waited long enough to ascertain that the thing doesn't work. And then, of course, I went with caution. My number one goal is to avoid an accident, right? But no Shirogorov. I think that when white went for queen a2, it was a mistake. I think they did not properly assess the counterplay coming. And I feel like, honestly, after queen f3, I think white already regretted queen a2. Just one, queen takes a2, queen f3, and I think black already regretted it because they sat here for 7 minutes before playing rook c7. If they were happy with what they'd done, they would have, played their next move, rook c7 or rook f8, odd tempo, so to speak, right? But rook c7, after 7 minutes, tells me they were already saying, like, what did I do? But I don't understand why white went here instead of d5. That seemed juicier. Oh, knight b5 rather than knight d5. That, yeah, I don't understand that one, Shirogorov. Rook f8 in hindsight might have been better than rook c7 because it's out of the way of these knight moves, right? Knight b5 might be to play knight d6 and try and break f7 instead of d5, but honestly, I mean, you got to grab the pawn that's in your hand instead of looking for... Oh, maybe it's because of d4? Maybe it's because of d4. Maybe white didn't want to give up the central pawn, huh? Definitely not Shirogorov. There's no way an A pawn is more important than a D pawn at this stage, right? But I'm still trying to figure out what white's real judgment or assessment was. The agony of defeat. Yes, Palgri. You are among many who know this agony you speak of. Yeah, Donnie says maybe more likely the plan is to go to D6 and get the F7 pawn. I live in California, by the way, Ash. Sorry. There's a lot of chats coming through on Twitch rather quickly. Yeah, so knight b5 might be to preserve the d pawn against queen d4, and it might be to also come to d6. But I would have grabbed the d pawn while I can. I don't feel like I've got any better chances coming later than this one. It's my feeling. That's kind of an all-important pawn. For one thing, when I take that pawn, even in this position here, what I've done is I've cut off like the knight coming back into the game probably, right? So the rook's coming here. Now this knight's a little bit off to the side. I feel like I've got some juice. And one thing I could do is this and just permanent back rank mate the king. Another option is to come in and keep playing for e6. So I definitely think white's in sort of like mild desperation territory, right, folks? Black's got two connected pass pawns, and whether you take on d5 or a7, your g pawn and d pawn are hanging. There's a good chance we're playing the rest of this game down up to 2 pawns as white. So I'm looking for my chances. I have to create problems for black, and I've got to go through this pawn. You could make a weird argument for maybe queen d5, not knight b5, but queen d5, looking at queen d8. I guess there's bishop f8. But basically the idea would be queen here, for argument's sake, e6. And if the pawn takes, then queen f8 is mate, because the rook will see through to f8. And so now I'm trying to either take on f7 with the pawn or the rook, or land queen d8 and or e7. So this continuation here, it could confuse some people. I guess queen d4 refutes it neatly at this level. They would both see that. Could we go check first and then e6? It feels like it doesn't have enough oomph here. And black should have some kind of pretty clean defensive move. Maybe queen e3. It's a little tricky to calculate, but maybe queen e3. If rook f2, rook c1. If king to the second rank, you can take the bishop with check. King h1. Maybe queen h. I don't know if queen h3 helps much. I don't know. Maybe I can play queen e2 in this kind of position, right? Because if white takes, I take with the rook. And if white takes the rook, I can take this one with check. Black should come out ahead with some mild calculation here. Different people have different things that are going to be hard for them, Red Velvety. If you find visualization very difficult to get better at, there's a pretty decent chance it'll always be one of the hardest things for you, which might make it something agonizing that you don't want to deal with, but it's also probably going to be one of the things that you can most get better at. There's also the possibility to make like a replacement skill, you know? Like to get good at something other than visualization that takes the place of it. Because like, for example, I can't picture a chessboard, but I just keep track of where things are as information. So you might need to approach visualization in a slightly different way, like find other ways to keep track of a position without actually seeing it. Oh, chess carbs, that is one option in training, actually. It has some upper limits, right? California Dreaming, great song, Richard, yeah. I definitely don't think, Shirogrove, that white wants the a-pawn. Yeah. Let's see what happens. Queen g5 check, king h1, rook d7, knight d6. So there we see it. White didn't go for the a-pawn. They come into d6. Pressure on f7, knight c6, queen d5. Wow, so already it looks like this could take, right? But white grabs the center pawn, defends d4, and maybe looks for rook f7. Queen comes back in, hitting some vulnerable spots. Maybe bishop c4. Let's see what we get. Also, there's rook f7, right, with discovered checks. I feel like this game has just gone into absolute tactical madness. And if black had traded the queens, they were just up. Sorry, Donnie, yeah. I think it's both no best for the jury. It's a classical game, so I think white both was preventing knight queen d4 and also envisioning bringing the knight to d6 at some point. Definitely white wasn't dreaming of the a-pawn. I like the King's Gambit, Lucky J. You can visualize fine, but you suck at it. Okay. Then maybe it's something that you can improve. Yeah, Jay, you've watched a lot of videos of mine, it sounds like. You did, Shirogrove. But you want to know a secret, Shirogrove? Can I tell you a secret? Don't tell everybody because it's not nice to tell on your friends in public. Shanklin says the word just himself when he has conversations about chess with me. Shh. Oh, white defended this square and the bishop and attacked something. Holy cannoli, that's a heck of a move for black to deal with. Whoa. Whoa. Oh. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, AABBB, etc. Is calling for just giving up the rook now, saying it's just time to give up the rook. We can't take time to save the rook. We can't deal with the pressure on f7. But can we even play rook takes d6? Blacks played a move. They played knight b4. More blows and counter blows. Yes, this is a pattern that Novest had told us about earlier. If rook d6, there's no escape. White just goes for the back rank mate instead of taking the rook. So black plays another fancy tactical move, counters the queen. Idea maybe to come to d3 with the knight next. The rook is still hanging. The pawn is still hanging. It feels like black is losing now, honestly, but we'll see if that's the case. All right, Jay is calling for queen b5. I was thinking of queen c4. Could I analyze this? I'm trying to analyze this, yeah. This is me trying. I just want you to know, Jay, this is me trying. So queen b5 is Jay's suggestion. White just played queen c4 as I was putting queen b5 in as a variation. It attacks the rook, but the rook's already attacked. Against rook d6, this move is still checkmate, even in this order. You see this, folks? That's important. White's got checkmate either way. With queen c4, I was keeping queen f7 available, right, to give this checkmate. But apparently it doesn't matter. Each way you can give checkmate. There's a good chance that either way you win, by the way, for those thinking that you should have played queen b5 or those thinking you should have played queen c4. There's a chance that both of them are right. Thank you, Shirogorov. It looks like my chat viewership like we have no Swifties in my chess chat here. No Swifties. Donnie's saying I could change my name from David to Trying and be I'm Trying. I don't know if I'm a Swiftie, but I just quoted a song of hers and nobody seemed to pick up on it. Queen c4, black's thinking. I don't really see a defense to either move, honestly, folks. Like if the knight comes here, white can take this for free. Against queen c4, if the rook moves somewhere, there's back rank mate. If the rook goes back, this move looks good. No Vesper the Drury quoting Britney now. You've got them confused. The lyric, Richard, is from the song "This Is Me Trying." I just want you to know this is me trying. You know, Jay was asking me to analyze a variation, and I just wanted Jay to know this was actually me trying to analyze that variation. Yes, Shirogorov. Yeah, I see the H pawn is about 0.5 of a pawn or so. Yeah. I didn't know that, Dabo. I didn't know there was a steady decline. I would have guessed that there's more music being made now total, that the average quality would have gone down, but that some of the best music of all time would still be being made now. Like standing on the shoulders of giants, you know? Like in a lot of fields, things get the very best are getting better over time. And I would have guessed that for music too. Queen c4. Oof, black hasn't found a move yet against this. This move even covers the rook. Queen b5 did as well. Black's run out of like spots in white's camp where you could go for counterplay, huh? I think this one's dead. Maybe we'll grab another game. Why I tend to stick with one game, AAA? Often if the game's interesting enough, I like to just stick with one game. I guess technically black can try rook d8 and the game won't be immediately over. It's fair enough. White will have to choose between taking on f7 or taking a free knight. Pretty similar to queen b5, rook d8, I would guess. I mean, Dabo, I don't know if the songs I listen to are from, 2022 or 2024 or whatever, but I'm continually discovering new songs that I like. I don't know if they're going to count as classics or something, but songs that I really like. Here are a couple songs I recently discovered that I like. A song called Too Young by Stoplight Observations. Oh, I can't chat, so I can't send you the name. Good Lord. Never mind. And another one that I really liked was Bittersweet Baby. Let's see, another cool song, Out of the Dark. I've been listening a lot to a French song, which is SALOPE in parentheses. I think that's a pretty good song. I won't say the word too much. Let's go look for another game since this one's going to be dead. Rook takes d6 played. Oh, there's the checkmate. All right. And we've got our license to move away anyway. No, Ray, I like most genres of music. I like folk and rock and rap and country and classical. I don't listen to mumble rap, I don't think. Why not knight d3 in this position? Right, knight d3 going for knight f2 was a big option, Donnie. I think that there's a number of options for white against that move, to me, the cleanest would have probably been rook f7. Because now, sort of whatever black does, the rook will move with discovered check. And if the king goes to h8, we have back rank checkmate like this, right? But to show my point about discovered checks, rook takes knight, discovered check, and then we can play queen c8 and mate. Same with queen e1, we have rook f1, discovered check. You know, if black trades, we have check and mate. I didn't see anything for black after this, basically. That was my take on knight d3, yeah. The chess player with highest chess elo plus musical ability. Good question, ABC. What comes to my mind is Vasily Smyslov. Wasn't he like a concert pianist as well as a world chess champion? I guess no best for the jury. You could try to define a classic piece of music as something that lots of people like and that is somehow unique, has something to it that few, if any, other songs have. Oh, he was a baritone? I'm pretty sure he was some kind of a musician. Let me look it up. Smyslov. Whitney Houston and Madonna are far, far, far better than any trash made today. Whoa, man. Whoa. All right, let me find out about Smyslov. Beside chess, he was an accomplished baritone singer. Okay, I got it wrong. I feel like there was a chess grandmaster who was a great pianist, but I got it confused. Oh, that's a good choice, Chex. Philidor, obviously the greatest chess player of all time, and he was actually a professional musician and an amateur chess player. Okay, Taimanov was a world-class concert pianist. Mark Taimanov. Same era as Smyslov. Famously lost to Fischer 6-0. He was not quite as good as Smyslov, but he was a candidate for the World Championships, right? Yeah, unfortunately, Tal was not a great pianist. That is fair to say. But yeah, I guess it would be Philidor would probably be the answer. And then after Philidor, you know, there's actually several good options apparently, but Smyslov and Taimanov are both good options. Have I met any celebrities in California outside of chess? Oh, actually, I have met one, Ash. Hey, ABC, what about Philidor's mom? I don't think you've thought your claim through at all. Oh, speaking of moms, I gotta grab something. I'll be right back. So, Ash, I have met one person who I think is famous. Cuba Gooding Jr. An actor, although saying an actor is because would be saying that maybe you don't know who it is, but I have seen people missing fingers and still being great pianists, actually, yeah. But my comment, Dabo, about Philidor's mom was not a your mom joke. It was just that Philidor's mom probably thought that he was the greatest chess player of all time because moms think the world of their kids, right? I met him on a movie set that we were both working on. Yeah. I had to give him advice on being a chess player. Bye, Donnie. Have a good night. Knight d5. White strongly on the attack here on this open F file. I could say that, I suppose, yeah. If the fellow we were talking to had a mother who was an astronaut, of course. Knight d5, that looks too strong. That looks too strong. Black can slow down the onslaught with bishop e7, but wow, White's still trying to save this endgame, huh? But as long as the black king walks forward, it's just winning, huh? Yeah, this endgame looks looks crushed. Do they each have an hour and 30 minutes left at the end of the game? I don't know. Kieran Culkin Dabo might be famous to someone other than me. I don't really know who is or is not famous, even myself, I don't think. King g7. Yeah. That's going to drop this knight. Oh, I guess the idea is to come back with rook f8 after White's back rank. So Bridges of Königsberg. Luckily, stopping and thinking this one through. Oh, this is clever. You've met Asa Hoffman. Cool. I met Asa Hoffman. He's famous to me, Dabo. Okay. So this is tricky here, and it's a good job of Bridges to stop and really think about this one. You've got two options, knight takes and rook takes, and we don't know if one or both or neither works. Dang, he's still good enough to beat Andrew Tang? That's insane. He must be like 60 or 70 years older than Tang. Man, Tang is a blitz demon. Asa Hoffman is a chess master who I think spent most of his life, if not all of it, in New York. I don't mean like he never left the city, but I mean like as his main place of residency. I think of him as being a New York-based chess player. And yeah, I used to like hang out in the parks in New York a lot. He appears in the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. When the father of Josh Waitzkin is seeing what tournament chess is like. Okay, knight takes f6. This is the move which looks like it's got problems on the f-file, right? But then when I thought about it, I decided rook f6, c6 has the clearest problem, right? That you can't retreat the knight without losing the rook. And knight f6, rook f8, there is actually a way to keep the extra material with this check, right? And then, depending where the king goes, right, you have knight to g3 covering the mate on f1. And if they go king h6, it's probably even a little bit worse after d3, right? Or d4, why not, right? While we're pummeling the opponent. So knight f6 seems best. Rook f8. Oh no, has not been played yet. So Bridges had a good think, came up with this move. I think it's the right move. Still some mild complications, but I think Bridges has seen to this knight's escape route covering the back rank, and so it's going to probably be an extra piece for white here in a bit. Anything better to play than rook f8? Not that I see, no. As far as I can see, you at least try rook f8, see if your opponent finds the whole sequence to defend the f1 square or not. Because otherwise we're down a piece for nothing. So yeah, that's what I would do. I guess you could calculate h5 before you move as well. Could be weird. h5. Trying to take away that square from the knight, right? I think this move here is probably going to work for white. Queen d7, queen takes, knight takes, hitting this and this, bishop here, and then d4. That will keep white's extra piece, right? It definitely gets an escape now with either bishop g5 or some pawn coming to e5. But yeah, I mean, it's another option. One could calculate that, see if it looks trickier for white than rook f8. Then choose between them. All right, the other game we were watching ended in a win for the side with the extra bishop. Ping Pong Savage against Empty Roads. Not a surprising end to this game. See, it was like this. We were watching the black king come in. White came after black's extra pawns here with the king. And black queens the pawn at the cost of that bishop. Good call. Evil move if white queens. There's queen h2 check. Okay, then goes and collects that, etc. So yeah, the game that we're on, you want to see how it got here, huh? Let's see. King's Gambit. Check. Takes. Well, this, unfortunately here, Far Eastern got this move wrong. Because that bishop sack on f7 does not look correct. And black's got a couple good options here. One is pawn takes. Just letting these pieces out. If knight takes, bishop's well defended. Another option is you take here. And then knight e5. Honestly, I think it's easier just to take with the pawn. Let your bishop out. Keep this lineup going. It's fine. But black took with the knight. So then white played knight e5 check. Pawn takes e5. Queen g4. Right? Oof. So this knight e5, that was like a big, big mistake for black, who could have kept the sacrificed piece, you know? And after this happens, now black comes under a brutal attack. The priority here, a lesson for black for the next game, the priority here is rook f8, king g8, sorting out the king and rook before anything bad happens. The check doesn't do anything special, and this g-pawn move only weakens the king more. Maybe black was worried about queen h5 because of this pin, but the best answer to that is, of course, to make somewhere that you actually want. Instead of trying to keep your king on the square it's on when you don't like where it is, make a route for it to somewhere better. Yeah? So really unfortunate, this idea of playing g6, right? And that weakened the king. And yeah, and now white is just rolling. Well, at least you recognized what went wrong, chess in my veins. I mean, presuming that you're right. But I've seen a lot of people playing too fast. So if that's what you think happened, there's a very good chance that that's what happened. Let's check if there are any games in the under 1600 arena, because I'm not really seeing any others in the 1600 plus arena. So let me see if there's still any games going here. Nope. Ping Pong Savage with the streak. Yeah, so you were the one who had over an hour and a half left in your 1.5 hour game on that last game. You know, this arena is not about setting a streak. It's about playing one game nicely, which you did. Your first game, you played well. I didn't see the other ones in between. I didn't see the streak. I saw you play one game well. And then I guess you got into the arena mode instead of the classical mode. But the idea is just to play one nice game, not to rack up a big streak here. No Vest for the Jury is in your camp. No Vest for the Jury always tries to win our arenas and usually does. I think it would be fair to say No Vest for the Jury. You often win the arena. But I see a lot of people here who just played one game. That's perfectly appropriate. Yeah. Okay, folks. Well, I think with the games winding down, we're going to set up Saturday's rapid tournaments now. Hooked on the streak, yeah. Yeah, we all like to be hooked up to that IV of dopamine, right? Points, numbers moving upwards. Sure, we can do a sanity check, no best for the jury. Gladly, yeah. We can do a sanity check for you. And then set up the Saturday rapid tournaments for tomorrow morning. So I want to go here. Click on your game against checks. Oh, I saw part of the game. Oh, wow. That's a fancy move from white. Oof. Right. Okay. Well, I can tell you this, no best for the jury. I saw this position approximately and thought that your position was bad. Do you think that your position is bad at this point? That was like a heavy intermezzo for sure. Do you think that at this point your position's bad? Because if we all agree your position's bad at this point, then we can look earlier at your moves. It's definitely uncomfortable, but you like your extra pawn. Okay, then we have to talk about why this position might be good or bad, huh? We have to find out which of us is right. I don't know if I'm right, you know? You might be right, but I guess we have to figure out if the position's good or bad. So, queen b6, rook c1, threatening knight c8, I guess. Oh my gosh, you had to play queen c6? I mean, you see your opponent can already get back the pawn there down. But they're not going to let your pieces out at the cost of one pawn. Yeah, basically, I mean, there's no scenario where you get out of this without losing your d-pawn, right? So you're not really up a pawn. And there's a lot of scenarios where you never get your pieces out. Avoiding bishop h6. Bishop h6 anyway. Threatening queen f6. Threatening queen f6. Do you not have bishop d8 here? Yeah, bishop h6 was disgusting. I looked at it and rejected it. I didn't think it worked. Bishop here, rook c8. That's fine. Maybe bishop g5 here. No, let's trade once first. And then go here. I gotta tell you, no best for the jury. Even if you lost the piece on c8, this would be your best option. b5. And now it's over. How about knight c8? Even if you can't win back this piece, you're better off not getting checkmated. This is like the best possibility ever. But okay, I don't know that white should go bishop h6. I believe white's position is just very, very good here with normal moves. Bishop here, I thought f6 was still holding on. Okay, let's play this move for white. Chess in my veins. It's not necessarily bad, but I mean, when you play a classical game, you should plan to play a classical game. You know, you should expect that it's going to take you between 2 and 4 hours, and if it does properly, most people would feel too tired to play another game. Yeah, a lot of tournaments, OTB, you play 2. Yeah, if you're not so tired, then maybe you didn't yet work hard enough. Right, bishop b4. Guess g6, right? This, I think, does not quite work for white. The sacrifice. This move looks interesting. Rook h5, but I think there's some chance that queen e2 is okay. Yeah, probably. No immediate knockout here. No immediate knockout. Yeah. Okay, let me try one other variation that I thought of before Noves for the Drury. It's going to be strange-ish, but it starts like this. Threatening here. I assume f6, right? And then I take here, 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 here. Oh, but my bishop's not on c1 anymore. So much for that one. I had a whole brilliant variation in mind, I think. There's probably more mistakes in it, but it was like this. And it seemed like no piece could get to g7. But I had my bishop doing double duty on two different diagonals that it couldn't both be on. Yeah, I can go over the opening for you again, Dabo, because Where's the Bread wants to understand why this opening wasn't good. Here is a pretty standard position of the Mora. Although I'll say this, Noves for the Drury, this bishop on b4, what is it here for if you never take the knight? I think the point of the bishop b4 variation is to take the knight. And then maybe like knight f6, rook e1, and maybe d5 or something very... Play for d5. Like I used to play this variation with the knights, Noves for the Drury, but I did it with the bishop on c5. I've never done it with the bishop on b4. You were in your book until here. Okay. And you're saying this move is a mistake. And why is it a mistake? Well, you don't have a lot of options. If you go f6, there's takes and queen here. Also maybe bishop e6. And if you go d6, they can just take it. You don't really have a choice here other than knight c4, do you? Maybe you played knight e5 too soon. Right? Are you sure knight c4 is the only mistake? Knight e5 looks like a mistake. Knight g6 was prep. Okay. The knight e5 looks like you're really like reaching, especially since it doesn't coordinate with this move. Why is knight g5 a mistake? You're spending a lot of energy moving the same pieces, right? So after white trades and attacks your knight, developing a new piece, you're bleeding time. And as I just showed, f6 and d6 both lose immediately. And you thought knight c4 wasn't good. So what about going back with knight g6? Yeah, I mean, I imagine white has this move here. I mean, that's probably your best move. It's not a great sign for playing knight e5, though, is it? To then retreat there. I guess your hope would be to take and castle. You're not lost, but you're worse, right? Like, let's put it this way. Are you ever going to have a good game with your bishop on c8? No. So at some point, you're going to have to go some version of moving the b pawn and bringing the bishop out, and your opponent's going to take d7. Isn't that like your best possible scenario at this point? Is that at some point you manage to develop this piece and lose this pawn, and your opponent's pieces will all be better placed than yours at that moment? I think it is about evaluating, Dabo, because even when we looked at a position way further into this game here, Dabo, when I said no to Noves, like, we agree that this position's bad, so we should go back and look for mistakes. Noves said, it's uncomfortable, but I believe that I'm better because I'm up a pawn, or something of that sort. Or it's uncomfortable, but I still like black because I have an extra pawn. And this position is like twice as brutal as that other one I just had on the board, right? So I think there is an evaluation piece here, definitely. Where Noves for the jury both likes pawns and I don't know, doesn't properly feel compensation for them, maybe? This one here, which you call playable, like white's way better, right? Like if you move this bishop out and allow rook takes d7, white's gonna have every piece better placed than yours. Whether or not they find something to do with it, you know, well, I can't tell you from here, but I'll tell you when it comes up, you know. Or you leave the bishop on c8 and you think you're just holding this and I have no way to make progress, but eventually I could play a move like bishop b5 and just take it. Or just ignore it and go h4, h5, h6 and attack the king while never taking this and leaving these pieces trapped over here. But I don't have to prove that white's winning. I'm just trying to tell you that white's better. Claiming winning is a whole other discussion, I have to say. Is the advantage more or less than 1.5 or whatever, right? Yeah, black can try a6, b5 for sure. Yeah, I like pawns and bishop pairs too. I just see that here black's pieces are bad. You know. In fact, you know, all the strong players I talk to think that I like pawns and bishop pairs too much. For reference, right? So I'm also a gambiteer. I like being up or down pawns. You don't get why grabbing the bishop pair is bad. It's not that grabbing the bishop pair is bad, it's that your position's already bad, right? And trading your knight for this light squared bishop has specific chances of losing control of the d6 square. Does that make sense? Because it's a dark square, so you trade a knight for a light squared bishop. And in the game, I mean, maybe you've got a better continuation, but in the game, one move later, you'd lost control of d6, right? You got tempoed on the bishop, and they came into d6. You could have come here, but I guess you didn't want to sack an exchange, maybe, like this. I guess that's lost, probably. So you came here. I mean, this position's probably lost. I don't know if the other one's lost, but the other one's bad. So that's why knight c4 doesn't work out. I mean, with tempo, the white queen comes here. Your bishop gets forced to the wrong diagonal to deal with this, and white takes over d6. Knight g6, it's less obvious. I mean, I still get d6. Like, I wouldn't say for sure that you're not lost here. I would say for sure you're worse, and don't know if you're lost, but you might be lost. I'm not promising that you're not lost. You want me to look up a computer evaluation for you on this position? The bishop on c4 is not a bad piece, but at the moment, this is the only piece that's not winning the fight over d6. So trading it with the knight gives the control over d6 a little bit more uncontestable. So the engine says that this position here is not yet lost. You're right. Yeah, I'm looking at it. It doesn't think it's that bad at all. It thinks you're super close to equal. That's a big surprise to me. I would have thought that you were somewhere between 0.5 and 1 point, between 0.5 and 1 worse. Would have been my guess. So that's pretty surprising to me that's so close to playable. Because personally, I thought when you played knight e5, that looks already like a small mistake to me. You know, up to this point, I've got no real problem with anything you've done, but I would think you should castle. And for reference, my weak computer engine here does think that you're a little bit better if you castle, the move I'd suggested before. So my computer does also think that knight e5 was a small mistake in that it thinks that you're a bit better before you play it and that afterwards you're fighting for equality. Yeah. No, Dabo, this computer, and I don't know how good it is, but this computer is saying that after knight e5, it's only like between equal and plus 0.1 for white, this position here. It does prefer bishop g3 to bishop d6, though, no best for the jury. Thing with bishop g3, instead of just occupying the square, allowing castles, and then playing knight b5, it thinks this is a little bit more unpleasant for black than what I first tried. So why is that better? I guess it just really values this bishop. It thinks you still get control of d6 and you have no reason to trade it off. Maybe black's eventually going to have to trade this bishop here, and then white will have just crazy control of the dark square. So maybe that's why they're keeping it. So, all right. Does that give you any like insight into how like a human can conceive of these values? No best for the jury. Like my feeling here is with knight e5 that you're burning energy by playing this piece a second time. If taking on c4 is not a threat worth time this early in the opening, then you're burning energy, right? And I like castles. I noticed the computer said that a6, keeping the knight out of b5, is a good move as well. Or bishop e7, just keeping their bishop off of g5. But if bishop e7 is good, then you'd really want to look at a variation here where you go like knight e7, castles, knight g6, and play bishop e7 in one go instead of going to b4, right? You might want to look at that, see if black has an advantage like this. Yes, bishop takes c3 makes sense to me, no best for the jury, but it doesn't mesh so well with knight g6, I would say. In this position here, bishop c3 makes a lot of sense to me because you could still play to take over the d5 break. right? So if you wanted to, and honestly, I would only play this on the move where you're ready to play d5. Right? And is this a good position? It's a logical position to me. The computer says no because of bishop a3. So we really need to hold off on bishop takes c3, as I was about to suggest, until kind of like the very, very ready moment. So I was going to tell you, if you want to play a bishop takes c3 line, there's no rush right here. I would castle, let white play, you know, bishop f4, bishop e3, or rook d1 or something, right? And in this kind of a position, takes, d5, takes, knight here. Here, I assure you that the computer will think that you've played a correct line as black. Minus 0.6 or 7, right? So knight g6 is a clever engine idea because it stops bishop f4. But do you see how I just played a way that I just castle, and bishop f4 was totally terrible? Totally terrible, because once I break with d5, white's not punishing me on any of these squares. So to me, there's like two pieces, Noves, for the jury. One is recognizing that those positions where white occupies d6, that basically that's worth a pawn or more, because your d7 pawn is so bad, and that, you know, your hope of developing your queen side is linked to giving back that pawn, is to giving up that d7 pawn, right? And then my second piece of advice is, like, as a human, try to make sure that your moves make sense together, right? Whether or not they follow a computer line. Like bishop b4, if this move makes sense, it has to do with bishop takes c3. Bishop takes c3 doesn't go with knight g6, it goes with d5. Right? No, Jay, I basically don't play bullet. I played a tiny bit when my first child was born. When I only had a minute or so between very short naps at times. An active way to prepare knight g7. Yeah, but if you don't want to take the knight, then c5 is a better square, or just playing knight e7, knight g6, and leave the bishop on f8, and later choose where it should go. Yeah. Yeah, was bishop h6 a good move, Scott? It looked super complicated. When I was watching the game live, I kind of rejected it as like me wanting to sacrifice too much. But it did seem like he had somewhat of a defense with bishop d8 to g5 right before you played queen f6. I don't know. Oh, you had seen that, and you had a plan or an idea there. Let's see if I've still got that line here. e5, bishop d8, knight f7. Is this the right position, Scott? I don't know, Alex. It's probably enough to read one of them. You probably don't need to read all three of them. No, I've got it wrong somehow. Anyway, this seemed to provide some decent defense for black, mainly covering the weak square on f6, but also planning to get out there and block the g file. Maybe you could lift the rook here, right? And then against bishop g5, you go here. You can play h4, you can sack and exchange, you can play queen f6. It still looks quite playable for white. Quite playable. Your 1800 FIDE, you need to read any of them. Not necessarily, Alex. Depends what your strengths and weaknesses are. If you're relatively good in strategy and positional play, then you could potentially skip them and work on other things. If you're better tactically and not amazing strategically, it might still be useful for you to read one of them. Is knight c4 a positional or tactical mistake? A little of both, I guess. I mean, presumably you overlooked the intermezzo knight b5 that Scott smashed out, which seemed to be a very powerful move. So in that sense, it was a little bit tactical. The consequences were strategic, right? It was about losing control of the dark squares then, the tempo of queen c4 hitting your bishop on b4, the bishop on b4 not being able to defend d6 and c7 and having to pick which square was more important to defend. A very difficult decision for any bishop ever. Okay, we're going to make tomorrow's rapid tournaments. It'll be at 9:30 a.m. Time control 15:05 as usual for the Saturday tournaments, 3-hour arena. Make another one. Jakob Agard books might be more like for over 2,000 or 2,100 than 1,800. Many of them, at least the ones that I've read. $15.5. Sorry, 9:30. I don't know if that's a contradiction, no best for the jury. When you play e6, fighting for or defending your light squares, you weaken the dark square next to it. That's, to me, the most typical trade-off in terms of pawn play in chess. I think probably 60% or so of people accept it, Dabo. They may be terrified as they do and wish that they couldn't, but feel like their bravery forces them to, or their lack of other options that they know. And probably about 40% of people just play knight f6 and laugh. And those people are happy with what they're doing. So those are the people you have to watch out for. My opinion too, no best for the jury. Accepting it is the most principled option, but when I analyzed it, I found that white basically had equality. It's not such a bad opening. And if white has equality when you accept it, then accepting it is not proving an advantage or refutation. It's just just a matter of taste, and you don't have to accept it. You could play knight f6. Yeah, as Shirogorov said, as Fischer said, get squares, give squares. Scott says in that crazy position we were talking about before that rook c3, g3 is favorable for white. Awesome. Yeah, there's this queen e2 move to harass white a little bit. Could involve some complications. Yeah, exciting. Yeah, that's a very solid setup, no vest for the jury. I've played that one as well. By the way, Scott says that they lost last week a 4-hour game against knight f6, right? In this position here instead of accepted knight f6. Long classical game. What would that video be, Ash? I've got the tournament set for tomorrow, and I'm ready to get ready for bed in a moment here. So, Ash, your question will be the last one for tonight. Everybody else, thank you for hanging out. It was lots of fun for me. Hopefully, at least some amount of fun for everyone else. Yeah, you're welcome, Novest. It was definitely an exciting game. Here. CFR Eastern, take care. Showed his books. Oh, so just going through what chess books I have? No, I don't think I'm going to do a video like that, Ash. I feel like we've talked a lot about what books we have and we like on the podcast, you know, so yeah, it doesn't feel like something too exciting for me to do. I don't think there's too much to add. And also, Ash, I've given away more than half of my chess books to my students, you know, so I don't have an insane collection of books to show. Maybe I've given away most of my books to students. I don't have that much. So, yeah. All right. That'll do it for us. Good night, everybody, or good day if you're in a better time zone than me at the moment. Take care. Much love to everybody.